Alrighty, so here's the hand that we're going to cover 5 different bits of poker math with. You can see we are on the button with Jack 9 suited. We're going to go through the entire hand first, and then we'll replay the hand 2 times, and then cover all the different math required, right? So 5 people in a 6-max table. Under the gun, loose aggressive player opens the pot to a full pot-sized bet. One caller, I decide to call. The blinds, they both fold. So we're 3 ways to the flop. 10, 8, 4, 2 diamonds, looking lovely, open-ender, plus the flush draw, plus the Jack 4 and overcard, potentially, right? $2.90 in the pot. Full pot size bet, fold. I elect to call. Hit the miracle turn. Not miracle, but we had a lot of outs, so a really good turn card for us. We got the flush, $8.70 in the pot. He bets 2/3 pot. We make the call. The river comes a 9, no pair on the board, no 4 diamonds to make me a little bit scared, right? He decides to check at this point. I have the flush. It's not like I'm going to check behind right here, right? I decide to bet 1/4 pot, and he makes the call, and he ends up having the ace-10 with the top pair on the flop that got out-turned right there. So that is the hand. We're going to go through a ton of different math. So before we actually dive into the math, this Excel spreadsheet with 2 different tabs down here, we're going to cover the first tab first, and then we'll go to the second tab, right? So initially, in this hand right now, he opens under the gun, we get a caller. Now, Jack 9 suited, it's not like a slam dunk call, right? Sometimes you call, sometimes you don't, depending on the circumstances at the table. But the first math that I want to teach you here is the implied odds math. When you're playing with a speculative hand, whether it's a suited connector, suited gapper, a pocket pair to set mine, you want to follow the 20x rule. Now what that means is you need to have 20 times the bet that you're calling. You need to have that in the stacks behind to make it worth drawing, because sometimes you hit your draw and you can get a ton of value when that happens. You want 20x behind. So if I have to call 85 cents right here, that means following the 20x rule, 20 times 85 cents means we need $17 behind in order to make this call. And if we need 17, we've got 24, he has 39, he has 34, plenty of implied odds. Makes this a call worth making. And of course, we're in position right here, right? How can you not call with Jack 9 suited? So we call and they fold. So we flop the flush draw plus the open and a straight draw. He bets full pot and now a fold. Now, this is the second bit of math. This is what we're going to be talking about. Outs and odds math. So first off, the term outs just means how many cards can help you hit a made hand on the next street. When we have the flush draw plus the open ender, that's 15 outs total. 9 cards for the flush draw and 6 additional cards for that open ender. So things are, things are looking pretty good right here. We have tons of outs. So, we are being presented with a full pot-sized bet. We have to call a pot-sized bet in order to see the next street. So what you want to do with outs and odds math is compare the odds you're being offered with your outs and how often you're going to hit them. So let me show you what that is. So when you're calling for outs and odds, you need to think about the break-even formula for calling. Now that's the amount of your call divided by the pot plus the bet plus the call. You need to win at least that frequency in order to make a profitable call. Now, let me show you how all of this math is calculated. First, let's just imagine the pot is $100 or 100 chips. Doesn't really matter. These are the different pot-sized bets. Quarter, half, 2/3, 3/4 full, and then 2x. They're kind of like the most common bet sizings that you'll see at tables. Now, this is just the percentage of those different sized bets right there. So if somebody's betting 25% into a $100 pot, that just equals 25 cents times the pot, which means they're betting $25, right? We just bring this formula down. If they're betting a 2/3 pot, they're betting 67. Now, if we're going to make the call, that's just that exact same amount, right? So it equals 25, we're calling 25. Now, remember, the break-even formula is the amount of call divided by the pot plus the bet plus the call. So if we just do our little formula, that call divided by, and then in parentheses, the pot plus the bet plus the call. So you can see the formula is right there, nice and simple. It's the amount you're calling and the amount you're trying to win once you make your call. So we only need, versus a quarter, 25% pot bet, we only need 17% equity. Drag this down. At the most, if somebody bets 2 times pot, we only need 40% equity. So it is possible to call with a lot of different hands right here at 40%. But we're talking about draws, right? So when you have a flush draw, that's actually 9 outs. The third bit of math that I'm going to teach you is the drawing equity, which is the ×2 rule. Whatever your number of outs, the chances that you hit it on the next street are just ×2 that number of outs. So 9 times 2 is simply 18%. We have an 18% chance of hitting our flush draw on the next street. If somebody bets a quarter pot, we only need 17% equity. We have 18 with the flush draw, so we're making the call. But you can imagine a gut shot with only 4 outs, that's 8% to hit, nowhere near the 17% that we need. Now, if we look down here, this is actually the hand that we have, the flush draw plus the open ender plus 1 overcard here with the jack, right? So that's actually 18 outs. Now, ×2 means we have a 36% chance to hit the next street. We've got 9 diamonds, 6 cards to complete the open ender, and those 3 jacks. That's a lot of outs, 36%. He bet full pot. We only need 33% to make a mathematically profitable call, so we make the call. Oh, another one, flush draw plus 2 overcards plus the open-ended straight draw would actually 21 outs for 42% equity, which means you can actually call a 2x pot bet right there. That doesn't mean you would, and you wouldn't do it every single time, because that's a pretty darn big bet, right? But at least mathematically, you could make the call. So let's take a look at this hand. And PokerTracker 4 does this math for you. Now, all the math that I'm showing you today, you want to practice this stuff off the felt. So go through your own hands utilizing this exact same math. And then once you utilize it off the felt, hopefully that'll translate to being able to use it on the felt. So if I was actually if I was facing this situation in an actual hand, I would think to myself, exactly what I just showed you. I have a flush draw plus an open ender plus 3 jacks may potentially win the hand for me. 18 outs, 36%. I only need 33. I am going to make this call right here. So I decide to make the call. Now, one thing I want to show you about this, all of these bits in yellow, these are all things that I would write down, if I were you, as a sticky note on the computer, especially if poker math is an issue, right? So if you're thinking about playing speculative hands, put it on, like a post-it note, right? Put it on a post-it note on your computer that when you play a speculative hand, if there's 20x behind, you can make the call. Bet sizes, if you face a quarter pot size bet, you need 17%. Just put these numbers in yellow on your sticky note. You can refer to it in game. Also, the drawing equity rule. This is a really easy one to remember. Just ×2 your outs ×2 is the chances that you have to hit it on the next street. But, you might want to write it down, but it's pretty easy to remember, just the ×2 rule right there. So that is all of the calling break-even math for outs and odds and stuff. All of those 3 parts right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some other math, but we're going to flip the script. We're going to replay this hand from Villain's perspective to take a look at some other math. So he decides to open under the gun, and we get this Villain 3, a very loose passive player deciding to call right now. So the next thing I want to teach you is percentage form. Now, percentage form is critical to understand when you're looking at somebody's stats in their HUD. So if we look at all these different stats right now, there's 3 ones that I want to point out right now. VPIP and PFR and call 2bet right down here. VPIP and PFR 32/8. 32 means he plays 32% of hands. He raises 8% of hands. There's a huge gap between VPIP and PFR, which means he's a very loose passive player. He's doing a lot of calls instead of raising. Now this one down here, that's the call 2bet percentage. It's at 37%. So he does a ton of calling, right? We'd love that. Now, in this tab down here in percentage form, some of you find percentages really hard to understand. You just can't grasp it really. Maybe you've always told yourself that you're terrible at math. Well, I want you to flip that and just think to yourself, instead of I'm terrible at math, think to yourself, percentages are easy. They're simply a part of a whole, right? That's all percentages are. Let me show you some really simple examples right here. Now, if the whole is $1, 25 cents is a quarter, which is 25%. Easiest one ever because it's 100 cents in $1, right? Next up, if you have an 8-piece pizza, 2 pieces is 25 cents. The whole is 8 pieces. Take away 2, that's 25%. 4 wheels on a car? 1 wheel is 25% of all the wheels on the car, right? So once you know the whole, you start to understand what the different percentages mean. And what often helps when I'm thinking about percentages, I just like to think of it in terms of 100% or doing something all the time. So if somebody is playing 5% of hands, that's only 5 out of 100. That means they're folding 95% of the time. This player loves to fold. When they come in and play a hand, they have a very tight range, right? Because they only play the top 5%. Now, what if they play 95% of hands? That's way too darn much. They're playing 95 out of every 100 hands they're dealt. Way, way too much right there. So percentages, parts of a whole, and also think of it in terms of 100. It kind of helps you to just to understand that percentage a little bit more. Now, most preflop HUD stat percentages, those refer to a range of hands. Now, if you played 100% every single hand, you have 1,326 combos in a preflop range. That's everything. If you simply have pocket aces, there's only 6 combos of pocket aces. Ace king suited? Well, you've got the clubs, the spades, the diamonds, the hearts. Only 4 combos right there, right? Ace king offsuit, all the offsuit versions. Club, diamond, club, heart, yada yada, right? So there's 12 combos right there. So if we come back to this spreadsheet right here, 100% range, like I said, is 1,326 hands. So let's look at some common percentages right here that you'll see on a lot of different people's stats, right? A VPIP of 40 means they play 40% of hands, which is 530 combos. 30 is 390, 10 is 133. If they fold to steal 85%, that means they're folding 1,127 combos. They're only calling with 15% of combos, right? So that's how you understand the different percentages right here. Now, oops, sorry about that, my alarm. So from Villain 2's perspective, from his perspective, this player just now called at 37%. Let's build his potential calling range. We haven't seen any 3-bets yet, so let's assume that this player 3-bets, let's just put aces and kings. Maybe they're calling queens and they're calling ace-king, right? So let's not put those hands in. Let's build something roughly 37% or so of a calling range. Let's start with, let's go a little low to 30, maybe 30%. Let's put all the aces in because sometimes players like to call with aces, right? They're not calling with ace-king. Aces or kings. We're saying those. Actually, this looks pretty good. This is a 35% right here. These are often cards that you'll see the loose passive players calling very frequently. Suited aces, suited connectors, gappers, suited kings, every single Broadway, and some offsuit kind of big card stuff, right? That makes sense that they call. Now, when you look at this range right here, from his perspective, wow, Villain 3 has a very wide range. So we're going to have to kind of look at the different flops and gauge how well that flop hits. But here's one of the things that I want you to do to help you learn ranges and to understand percentage form. I want you to go through, because you probably enter most pots as the pre-flop raiser, I want you to make an entire sheet full of calling ranges that your opponents often call you with. Let me show you what that looks like. Actually, let's come back here real quick. So you want to utilize Flopzilla to build those 2-bet calling ranges. And why is that? Like I just said, you enter pots most of the time as the raiser, so you want to start to understand what these players are calling with. He calls 10% of the time. What does that range look like? He calls 35%. What does that range look like? That's what you want to do. Take range screenshots and print it out for in-game use. Let me show you what that looks like. I use Microsoft Publisher for this, but you can use Word, Excel, whatever program you want. And if we zoom in here, zoom in a little bit more, actually. Here we go. You can see that I already put these up. Here's a 10% calling range. Here's a 20% calling range. And you're going to build these how you think your opponents play. At your stakes, you know, your opponents might never call with those offsuit king 10, queen 10, jack 10, but they'll be calling with more aces. Hey, that's up to you. Go ahead and put that as their calling range. You need to make this and tailor it to your opponents, what they call with. 30% right here. So let's go ahead and take this 35% range. I use the nifty little Microsoft snipping tool. And I don't know if you can actually see what I'm doing as I'm doing it here. But you could do this, or you can hit print screen on your keyboard. Whatever works for you, go ahead and do it. But get that screenshot, copy, paste it in place. Well, move it roughly in position. Shrink it up, and bam! Now my spreadsheet has 10, 20, 30, and 35%. I can, of course, add 40. I can add 15%. You can make this however you want. You can do 2 different sheets. Every 5% is a different range, and you just build it out. And the reason why you're doing this is as soon as this player calls, you look at that 37%. Wow, that's pretty close to 35%. Okay, now I can visualize this is the range that they're playing with. How well does it hit on this specific flop? So, now that you make that and print that sheet up and everything, right, what happens on the flop? Ignore me for now. 10-8-4, diamond, club, diamond. 10-8-4. Now on this board, this range hits top pair and open-ended straight draw or better only 31% of the time, right? So there's a high likelihood that he's going to be folding here, unless he has a flush draw. Maybe we think this player calls with gut shots. Maybe they call with pocket pair below and then mid pair hands. Well, they're still folding 45% of the time. So if they're folding 45% of the time, we can go back to our math spreadsheet right here. That was all the percentage form stuff. Let's take a look from Villain's perspective, some break-even bluffing math here. Now, it is the same basic formula. Your break-even percent is the amount of your bet divided by the pot plus the bet. And the question is, as you're deciding on your bet size, right, are they folding at least blank percent of the time? Now, I did all of this ahead of time. If you're betting, in this instance, he is betting a full pot-sized bet. Now, it needs to work 50% of the time. Because remember, the formula for this is simply the amount of your bet divided by the pot plus the bet. So 100 divided by 200 is 50%. I need him to fold 50% of the time. Now, right here, so we want him to fold 50% of the time. He's only continuing 45. If this is an accurate continuance percentage, he's continuing 45, which means he's folding 55, which means ignoring this player up here, this bet is a good bet. He's folding more than enough to make it, to justify this sizing, right? So that's how you would use your break-even formula. Choose the sizing based on how often you think they might bet. And remember, the larger the bet, the more often they'll bet. Now, this is kind of just standard on this board. How often is he folding? But what if we think realistically, betting full pot, is he really calling with middle pairs and gut shots? Maybe not, right? Because such a big bet, $2.90. Well, if he's actually not continuing with those hands, he's only continuing 32%, which means he's folding 68% of the time. It's even more likely to work at a full pot-sized bet. So that is the break-even math now. Let's continue through the hand. He makes the bet. He gets the fold he wants, but then this guy, this crummy guy on the button, decides to call. Oh, crap. What's going on? Oh no, that's not really a good card. Sure, I picked up a flush draw, but now if the opponent had a king queen or king jack, 2 overcards on the flop, now he hit, my second pair is beat. So what does he decide to do? He decides to bluff at the pot. So once again, 580 into 870 is actually a 2/3 pot-sized bet. So let's look at our sheet. 2/3 needs to work 40% of the time. And you can see the formula right here. He's betting 67, theoretically, $67 into a $100 pot. So he's trying to win 100 plus his bet back, which means 40% of the time is the break even. Now, if you think about this hand, Hero called on that board a full pot-sized bet. Hero has plenty of flush draws in his range. He potentially has king 10 even, king jack for some overcards, king queen for some overcards, and some things that really you don't want to see that king hit on the turn, right? So is Villain folding often enough right here? We're not going to go through this range and everything. But seriously, I don't think, especially knowing me as a player, I'm a tight aggressive player. If I called on the flop, I had something worthy of calling. That king of diamonds hit that flop really well, or I shouldn't say hit. That king of diamonds connects with the flop very well. So it probably connects with my range, right? My guess is I am not folding at this point. I am not folding 40% of the time. I'm probably only folding 20% of the time. Maybe I had just the open-ended straight draw with no flush draw. That's the kind of hand I could be folding right here, like the Jack 9 of spades with nothing on the board other than the open ender, right? But really, I think this is not the best of bets right here because that connects so well, and he completely whiffed. It's not like he has King 10 and now has a 2-pair hand. He is straight up making a bluff, hoping I'm going to fold, so we can utilize this break-even formula again. 2/3 pot, 40% I need to fold. I am not. This is not a good bet right here. So I decide to call. He's probably crapping in his pants. And then the 9 comes, doesn't help him all, doesn't give him trips, doesn't give him 2-pair, doesn't give him a 4th diamond, right? Oh, why does it keep disappearing? It doesn't give him a 4th diamond for the nut flush, right? So he's kind of bummed out. He decides to check right now. And then Hero, this crazy guy on the button, decides to bet 1/4 pot. Now, just like the calling break-even formula down here, when it comes to calling on the river, same exact formula. The amount of the call divided by the pot plus the bet plus the call, that's how often you must win. So you need to ask yourself, am I winning at least blank % of the time? So if we come back up here, I'm betting 1/4 pot. Or Hero, the button is betting 1/4 pot. He has to call that 1/4 pot, which means he needs to be good 17% of the time, which is 1 out of 6 or pretty close to 20%. Let's just say 1 out of 5, just to keep the numbers simple in our head. He needs to win 20% of the time. Am I really going to be betting on this river when the river card comes and it completes a straight? That turn card came in and completed a flush. I also potentially have a king that I hit on the turn right there. How frequently is his second pair going to take it down? Not too often at all. My guess is not near 17, not near 20% of the time. Maybe I'm bluffing here. I mean, knowing me, I'm probably bluffing here close to 0% of the time. And if I am bluffing, I'm going to be making it bigger to give him a bigger reason to fold. I'd probably be shoving as a bluff right now. This is a straight up value bet. He needs to be right 17% of the time, and I guarantee he isn't. So like we already saw, he makes the call, and then by doing that, I bagged an additional 20 big blinds with a turned flush right here. Lovely hand, made a ton of money. From my perspective, I played it right the entire way, calling with my speculative hand with the 20x rule, calling on the flop with a flush draw plus the open ender plus the jacks. Oh, if I would have hit a jack, I would have won right there too, right? With that pair of 10s that he had, right? So it was an actual out for me. And then from his perspective, the pre-flop open raise, I'm fine with that. The large bet on the flop, not exactly happy with it. He had top pair, but I don't fault him too much for that. He's just the kind of guy that loves to bet, as you can see bet flop and turn a whole lot right there. So I'm not a fan of either of those. And then calling on the river, hate the call on the river. He should have just folded at this point. But that's one of the things that you want to do when you catch that good hand and you got a guy that doesn't like folding. Get some value out of the guy for sure.